These are my 5 reasons why you're not building muscle. Now, these are backed by scientific literature. However, these are ones that I tend to align with the most. So you could search on the internet anywhere and find a difference of opinions. But if you're into how I view things, then this is where I stand on it. Now, if you look at YouTube, there's all kinds of different scientific literature backing up just about everything. But I try to look at what has the most scientific literature behind it alongside what makes sense for me and my lifestyle. So the first reason that I find that people aren't building adequate muscle is they're not getting adequate stimulus, or they're having an improper frequency with their training. You see, a lot of times we follow bodybuilding splits to build muscle. When I say that, I mean we follow routines where we might hit chest and triceps or back and biceps. And you know what, to be completely fair, those things build muscle tremendously well. But for me, they don't always align with real life for me. For example, if I go and I blast my legs, I can't really run around with my kids the next day, but I'm also an avid runner and I'm an avid hiker and backpacker. So I can't really go enjoy the things that I love if I'm blasting my legs like that. However, if I want to grow, I know I need to have the volume there, right? So a long time ago, I watched an interesting interview with Firas Zahabi on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it changed how I looked at my training forever. And my body changed, how hard it was for me to build muscle changed, how hard it was for me to stay lean changed. And he looked at the overall total training volume on a given body part over the course of a week versus in just one day. So for example, if I were to do 10 sets or 15 sets of legs on Monday, what's the big deal if I spread that out over the course of the week? So what I started doing is maintaining intensity by being able to train really hard, but training in a more full body sense. This made it so that I was able to maintain a high intensity frequently throughout the week. So for a lot of people, that might look like every other day. Like Monday, you train full body. Wednesday, you train full body. Friday, you train full body. Sunday, you train full body. You just kind of continue in this every other day fashion. Proper stimulus is the biggest driver for muscle growth. Muscle protein synthesis is made up of 2 really important things: stimulus and protein. And the larger of the 2 is probably the stimulus. So the more that you can stimulate a muscle and the more frequently you can stimulate that muscle, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that could be very, very powerful. If you can handle more volume, by all means, go for more volume. But once you start getting over the age of 35, 40, you start realizing that these high volume bodybuilding style splits just leave you a little bit debilitated and take a lot out of your tank. And then you're not able to keep the frequency of touch points on the muscle that you could otherwise. So maybe you might build a little more muscle in a shorter amount of time doing bodybuilding style splits, but I think over the long haul, you'll build more muscle later into life if you were to consistently have these cycles where you are frequently stimulating the muscle. The next one may sound obvious at first, but there's a huge amount of nuance based on new literature, and it's not having enough protein post-workout and then subsequently not getting enough protein later on throughout the day. So based on a study published in December of 2023, published in Cell Reports, you've probably heard me talk about this, I love this study, it demonstrated that people could have 100 grams of protein after their workout and it would still absorb. They traced the amino acids and saw that for the following 12 hours, these amino acids were absorbing and they were ultimately resulting in increased levels of leucine in the muscle, indicating there was muscle protein synthesis occurring. There is a caveat, however. They weren't consuming 100 grams of whey protein. They were consuming like 100 grams of a milk protein, which was like kind of a casein blend ultimately. So what this means is perhaps we go with partially fast digesting protein and partially slow digesting protein. So what this looks like for me now is a nice big bowl of super lean ground beef, or maybe some ground chicken that's like a 96% lean, and a nice big tasty protein shake. For me, it's about 80 to 85 grams of protein now. For a long time, I was still doing a large amount of protein against the advice of a lot of nutrition peers. I would still have 50, 60 grams of protein, but I was convinced that it just made sense that my body would use it. I trained hard. All of our, animals in the world go days without eating, and then they eat. You're telling me that they can only absorb a little bit at a time? It just didn't make a lot of sense. Of course, the speed of digestion played a role too. But the point is, I think a lot of people are cutting themselves short by only having maybe 25 grams of protein after their workout, and then they're struggling to get enough protein the rest of the day, leaving it falling short, or they're trying to add more protein later in the day, and they're just not able to get it because that's a point in which muscle protein synthesis might not be as optimal. So with this, when you consolidate more protein post-workout, you decrease the risk of not getting enough protein throughout the remainder of the day. Imagine if you could get 100 grams of protein surrounding your workout and you worked out in the morning. Then you really only need to figure out how to get another 100 grams or so in the rest of the day. Again, if you're 200 pounds, simple math. Pretty easy, right? So again, adding a protein shake and then also having a large amount of protein with that protein shake, you get the fast absorbing and the longer lasting that's going to absorb throughout the rest of the day, like we saw in that Cell Reports study. If you're looking for a good whey protein, people ask the one that I use. I use almost exclusively one from Josh Bowmar. It's called Bowmar Nutrition, mainly because it's the best tasting protein shake. If I'm going to have a protein shake, I want it to be my treat. I don't drink milkshakes. Every once in a while I'll have one, but this is the best thing I could have that's close to a milkshake. So it feels like a treat. It feels like after a workout I'm having a strawberry milkshake or a banana milkshake. I'm not exaggerating when I say that it is the best tasting protein shake I've ever had, especially if you make it with something like some raw milk or some Fairlife milk where it just tastes super, super good and creamy. Anyhow, also sweetened with allulose and stevia, so there's no artificial sweeteners or dyes or anything like that. So that link down below is a 15% off discount if you want to try it. I think you will be converted to using this protein powder from now on once you actually taste it. So that link is down below. The next one is crappy sleep. Yep, you're probably going to want to skip through this one because this is just regurgitated information. You've talked about this a million times. There are studies that show that just 1 to 2 nights of poor sleep will reduce muscle protein synthesis by 30% the following day or more. And some studies demonstrate that the more the sleep deprivation occurs, the even worse muscle protein synthesis occurs. I had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon on the channel, and she talks about how protein synthesis is affected by sleep. I'll cut to a quick clip of her talking about that for just a second. Any other keys for building muscle?
I think that we've covered the fundamentals. Okay, I'll give you one. Sleep. So there's some new evidence to support that 1 night of sleep deprivation will suppress muscle protein synthesis by 18%.
Bottom line is, as far as rest and recovery is concerned, sure, sleep is important, but here's my goal for you. The most important part of sleep, for muscle at least, is going to be your deep sleep. Okay, so REM sleep is great. It's super critical, beyond critical. But as far as your muscle recovery and your growth hormone pulses, that's happening in the first 4 or so hours of sleep, for the most part. That's why people find that even if they get like 5 hours of sleep, their brain might not be functioning well, but they're recovering well. Do everything you possibly can to optimize the first few hours of sleep. Okay, so what I do is if I can at least put blackout or eye covers on, so it's blacked out, sometimes I'll literally even sleep with earplugs. Eventually I knock them out of my ear, but the first 4 hours or so, I am sleeping really hard. Then the kids wake up or whatever, they do their usual thing during the witching hour, but at least I know if I'm getting that first 4 or 5 hours in hard and fast, I at least know that I'm getting some of the deep sleep that's affecting muscle and physiological recovery there. The next thing, you're not doing micro bulks and cuts. The heck does that mean? Well, this is a little bit nuanced in my opinion. Some people really like to get into heavy bulk mode where they say, I'm gonna build muscle and that's what I'm focusing on, and then I'll focus on cutting. I have been a fan of the micro bulk and cut for a very long time. When I say micro bulk and cut, I mean I focus on a caloric surplus and a huge protein surplus for short amounts of time to the point where no one would ever notice that I went up 1 or 2% body fat. And then I cut back so that when I do cut, I'm not having to tap into my existing muscle that I built. If I went and I put on 20 pounds and 10 pounds of it was muscle and 10 pounds of it was fat, I'd have to do an aggressive cut for a long period of time, put myself in a deficit, and run the serious risk of losing that hard-earned muscle. If I say I'm gonna go in a surplus for a week, and then I'm gonna reel it back a little bit the next week, I'm staying in this nice little area where I'm never having to go into a super extreme deficit, and I'm able to keep control. Not to mention, I'm really happy with how I look. In essence, it's the quintessential sort of build muscle and burn fat at the same time. Plus, and I learned this from sort of the CrossFit mentality here and there, and I know that might devalue my take for some people, but it's about maintaining intensity. When I say that, I mean, if I'm gonna go into a bulk for a week or two, or even a few days, I can maintain intensity with the integrity because I know it's a short amount of time and I can deal with it. I can be hyper-focused and hyper-diligent on how I craft my meals, my protein. And the same thing with a cut. I can do it and I can handle it if it's for a short time. I am going to get lackadaisical if I'm having to cut for 3 months or 6 months. So having these short stints allows me to mentally maintain intensity so I can bulk cut, stay lean, and build some muscle. And the last thing that people are going to rain on me for, but I personally think it's so important, you are not prioritizing gut health. It all starts here. It may seem like it starts here with the stimulus, and it does, but if you're not absorbing and your gut is not working, that is problematic. So much of your protein absorption happens there. So much of your insulin response happens there, it starts there. So much of your immune system and your recovery starts there. And that's probably the biggest piece. When I look at recovery, when I look at my ability to do the same thing day after day after day after day, if my gut is unhealthy, I notice it. And one of the biggest factors there is alcohol. Alcohol wrecks our gut barrier. If your goal is building muscle and you are still drinking alcohol, that's fine, but just accept that you are probably leaving a lot on the table. When it comes to your sleep, when it comes to your performance, when it comes to your nutrition, when it comes to your gut health, when it comes to your microbiome, when it comes to your gut barrier integrity, when it comes down to your visceral fat, when it comes down to histamines, when it comes down to all the things, just know that. And maybe just knowing that is enough for you to say, maybe it's not really worth it. I focus on the quality of my nutrition over just the calories. Believe it or not, I prioritize my protein intake and I don't really count calories. I know when I'm in a surplus or I know when I'm not. And I know this kind of ropes in with the gut health because I do feel like having huge boluses of food may not be good for the gut. But if I focus on nutrient quality, it all falls into place. I eat enough for my body, I don't really gain fat, I crave protein, which is what I really need. And I'm telling you, if you put your emphasis on there, you're gonna save yourself a lot of headache by painstakingly driving yourself absolutely up the wall. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.